Hello everyone, welcome back to Talking History. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name's Liz and I would just like to apologise for my absence for the past few weeks. It's been very hectic. Everything with work, I'm a carer and I work nights. So I've tried to film a video after I've done a night shift and it's not good. Really not good. I just can't concentrate. I can't do it. And we've also had the painters and decorators in the house, so everything's been turned upside down. We've been living out of our bedroom. If we're newlyweds, we've been quite happy, but we're not newlyweds. So anyway, enough of that. But I've been very grateful that I have my craft room and I was able to hide in there for a while. But everything is done. We got a little bit more to do, but that's not until November. So the house is getting pretty much to how we want it. Work has calmed down, touch wood, it's all calm. So I am back filming, which I have really missed. I have really missed doing these videos, but it's also given me a chance to do more research for future videos. But anyway, one more thing actually before I do want to start. I would like to give a really big, massive shout out to my amazing husband, who not only puts up with me, believe me, that's quite the challenge, but he also puts up with my ramblings about history. I'm one of those that, did you know that and such. I'm that. He puts up with that, but he also does the editing for these videos. And I'm learning as I'm doing these videos. My husband is learning as he's doing it. We're both learning together. And I think he's doing amazingly. So thank you so much. I love you. Anyway, today's video. Today's video is quite possibly the biggest one I have covered so far. We are still in the Anglo-Saxon period. It is quite the biggie. It's quite a juicy one. So I really hope you're comfortable and you're settled for a while. Today's video, Aethelred the Unready. King Aethelred, who would become known as Aethelred the Unready, was born around 966. He was born to King Edgar the Peaceful and his second wife Aethelred, and he was the couple's second son. Aethelred had an older brother named Edmund, who was born the year before and sadly died in 970. Ethelred's older half-brother was Edward the Martyr, who had been murdered in the year 978, and at the time it was believed that his mother had orchestrated the murder of her stepson to get Ethelred onto the throne. Ethelred was only 12 when he became king. He was coronated in April in 978 by Bishop Dunstan. And Ethelred was considered too young to be able to rule alone, so his mother, Aethelred, had exerted most of the influence at the royal court. And it was during the first couple of years of his reign that things were calm, they were stable. But that was until the year 980, when small bands of Danish invaders had carried out coastline attacks, testing the English defences across Hampshire, Thanet, Cornwall, Devon and Cheshire and Dorset, These raids would continue through to 984. And it was also around 984 that Ethelred came of age, and he decided he wanted to take control of his own government. and he chose new members of court, which was younger advisors, so more his age, more he could possibly, relate to. Ethelred also married. He married Alfgifu, the daughter of the Earl of Northumbria, and it was shortly after they married, Alfgifu fell pregnant, and she would go on to give birth to a boy that they named Ethelstan. From the years 988 till 1002, they would go on to have 8 more children. They were Egbert, Edmund, who would become Edmund Ironside, Edgif, Edred, Edwig, Edgar, Algifu, and Wulfrith. In around 990, the Vikings had returned for more attacks on the country, and in 991, the Battle of Malden, which is in Essex, had sparked a series of raids and sporadic attacks that continued throughout Ethelred's reign. The Vikings had landed on Northey Island, which was linked to the mainland by a low causeway. And there's no definite evidence of the amount of Vikings that had descended onto the Essex coast, but it could have been anything up to 3,000 men. And they were all under the leadership of Olaf Tryggvason, whose men appear to have been far more organised than the usual raiders. A Saxon army that was led by Earl Brythnoth were on the other side of the causeway, which had flooded during the high tide, so it is impossible to cross. The Vikings had shouted for their demands across the causeway, which they wanted tribute, which was money. Brythnoth refused, and he just basically shouted insults and abuse back to the Vikings. Brythnoth had prepared his men for battle at the south end of the causeway, and as the tide had receded, Vikings advanced, and a few of Brythnoth's men were able to hold the narrow causeway against them. As the Vikings withdrew, they asked if they could continue their fight on solid ground, have more advantage, so make it more equal in a way. And Brythnoth agreed. He allowed them to cross. And as soon as the Vikings crossed onto the mainland, not only did the battle continue, but it was fierce. Brythnoth was killed, and a small group of his men, in an heroic attempt to avenge their leader, were also killed. And the rest of his men, they fled the field. After the defeat of Brythnoth and his army, the Vikings got their tribute from local leaders in Hampshire, Kent, and the west side of present-day England. Ethelred was forced to give them 3.5 tons of silver, which is £10,000, in order for them to leave and to keep the peace. The tribute would become known as Danegeld. So once the Vikings received their Danegeld, they left, promising no further threat to England, and then things went back to as they were. All that we know about the Battle of Malden is thanks to an unknown Anglo-Saxon poet, which only fragments remain of this poem, that tells the tale of Brythnoth in detail. The Vikings soon returned in the summer of 1000, where they demanded more tribute. The Vikings sailed up the River Thames, taking London under siege. Aethelred was forced to make another Danegeld payment. This time, the Vikings wanted more. They demanded 5 tons of silver, which is £16,000. And just like before, as soon as they got what they wanted, they left, only to return again a year later in 1001, raiding along the south coast. In February of 1002, Aethelred's wife Alfgifu died. And 2 months later, in April, in a hope of stopping the raids, Aethelred married Emma of Normandy, who was the daughter of Richard I the Fearless of Normandy. And their marriage was purely political. There was no need for heirs. Aethelred had 9 children. There was no pressure on Emma for producing heirs. Even though they had 3 children of their own, but there wasn't the pressure of producing heirs. This was purely political. Aethelred, in a hope to stop the raids of the Viking attacks, is the reason why he married Emma of Normandy. Emma would go on to have a lasting impact on English history, and believe me, a video of Emma of Normandy is on its way. Give me a little while. I want to get everything right for this woman because she is amazing. But the problem for Aethelred was that things weren't moving quick enough. He wanted the solution to go, bam, done. Yeah, no more raids. Yeah, that's fine. You married Emma of Normandy. Yeah, don't worry. I won't do no more raids. It's fine. It's calm. It didn't go that way. Things weren't moving the way Aethelred had hoped. So on the 13th of November in 1002, Aethelred made his worst decision in his entire reign, which would give him his nickname Aethelred the Unread. Which his name, the Unread, meaning bad counsel. Aethelred's name meant noble counsel, so the Unread meant bad counsel. The Unready wouldn't actually come about until quite a while after. But as I said, Aethelred's name meant noble counsel. The Vikings' raids were becoming increasingly troublesome, and they were becoming more and more difficult to deal with. So on St. Brice's Day, King Aethelred ordered all the Danes who were among the English people to be killed. He made this horrendous decision as he had been made aware that there was a plot to not only have Aethelred himself killed, but also those in his council. And after those in his council were killed, the Danes would take control of his kingdom. Aethelred acted in not the best way, but at the time, I think he thought that was the only way he could do it. It was the completely wrong decision. We know that, but this was over 1,000 years ago. We weren't far away from the Battle of Hastings. It was only 60 years away from the Battle of Hastings. There was evidence that had suggested that settlements in border towns such as Oxford were the site of these massacres. In 2008, in St. John's College in Oxford, a burial site was discovered. The burial site held over 35 Viking warriors, and the skeletons had showed evidence of a violent death. It appeared that many of the attacks had become from behind, given the idea of a massacre. It's not clear as to how many Danes had lost their lives during the massacre, but one of those that was killed in the attacks was Gunhild. And Gunhild was the sister of the Danish king Svein Forkbeard. Gunhild was married to Palig Tokson, who was a Dane who Aethelred had made Earl of Devon. Gunhild's death had resulted in Svein Forkbeard sending an invasion of attacks in 1003. An Anglo-Saxon chronicle reported of a bloody battle between the East Anglians, who were led by, please forgive my brutality of this pronunciation, I really cannot pronounce it. I don't mean to be disrespectful against his name. I generally cannot pronounce it. Yolsaitel Snillinger. I hope I got that right. Please, please, please don't come at me. I don't mean to be disrespectful against his name. I generally cannot pronounce it. I struggle pronouncing my own flipping name half the time. And an army that was led by Forkbeard. The chronicle had stated that Ulfseitel and the councillors in East Anglia had attempted to buy a truce. The Danes, ignoring the truce, please forgive the shouting if you can hear it. I live by a high school and it's kick out time, so all the kids are walking past down the alleyway. So I do apologise if you can hear it. I just hope they don't swear. Don't swear. Anyway. The Danes had decided to ignore this truce, and they marched on to Thetford, where part of the East Anglian army engaged them. The battle had ended in a draw as the Danes managed to escape. A manuscript of the Chronicles stated that the Danes later admitted that they had never met any harder fighting army than what Ulfseitel had given them. It was reported that going back to Ethelred and Emma of Normandy, it was reported by William of Malmesbury that the couple hardly ever got on. But they did manage to have 3 children, who was Edward, who would become known as Edward the Confessor, Alfred, and Godgifu. In 1005, the Danish army left England to return to Denmark. It was possibly through the injuries that they received in battle, although it was more likely due to the severe famine that had afflicted the continent and the British Isles in that year. Ethelred continued to pay the Danegeld until 1013, when Svein Forkbeard returned to England with an invading force, being intent on being crowned King of England. The end of 1013, the English resistance had collapsed. Svein had conquered the country. Ethelred and his family fled to Normandy to seek refuge. Ethelred had actually sent Emma and the children to Normandy first. Ethelred fled to Isle of Wight, and then he went to Normandy. But Svein died suddenly in 1014, leaving his son Canute the Great as King of England. Ethelred returned to England, being restored back to the throne, and he launched an attack on Canute and his allies, who was the men of the Kingdom of Lindsey. Canute's army had not completed their preparations, had decided to withdraw from England without a fight in 1014. Canute returned to England in 1015 with a Danish army of around 10,000 men in 200 ships. The invasion would bring grisly warfare on England for the next 14 months. Shortly after Canute's return, Ethelred fell ill. Canute was attacking more regions of England. Ethelred's son Edmund had summoned an army, but they refused to fight without the permission from the king. Ethelred duly summoned an army, however, according to chronicles, he soon returned to London as he was afraid of someone wished him harm, or possibly he had been warned that his own son Edmund may betray him. In summer of 1016, 50 years away from the Battle of Hastings, Canute had taken Northumberland. From there he marched towards London. Edmund also marched towards London in an effort to stop him from taking the city. Edmund's army pushed the Vikings out of London. Ethelred died on the 23rd of April in 1016, aged 50. Edmund Ironside became king. I would just like to point out the fact that Ethelred died on St. George's Day. Ironic, maybe? I don't know. After pushing the Vikings out of London, Edmund risked travelling to the countryside at risk of being attacked by Danish soldiers. Canute was made aware of Edmund's movements, and whilst marching through Essex, Edmund's army was intercepted by Canute. On the 18th of October in 1016, at the Battle of Ashendon, victory was had by Canute, who overwhelmed Edmund's army. Following the defeat, Edmund was forced to sign a treaty with Canute that basically all of England, apart from Wessex, would be controlled by Canute. And should either one of the kings die, the other will take all of England. Edmund would die on the 30th of November. Canute became King of England, reigning for 19 years. Canute would also marry Ethelred's widow, Emma of Normandy, where they two would have children of their own. But that's all for future videos. Ethelred has gone down in history as an awful king, being branded with the notorious nickname Unready. The Anglo-Saxon dictionary defines the unread as bad counsel or bad plan. Although the nickname doesn't really give anything respectable about the king himself, the nickname isn't actually focused on Aethelred, but on those around him. Specifically, the royal council known as the Written, who was expected to provide Aethelred with good counsel. Aethelred was laid to rest in St. Paul's Cathedral, and 650 years later, during the Great Fire of London, the part of the cathedral where Aethelred's tomb led, was destroyed. Today, a plaque is in place of him and other monuments that were lost in the Great Fire. I really hope I've done Aethelred proud. I think he's hugely misunderstood, but none of us can say what we would do in his situation. As I said, that was over 1,000 years ago. Things were so different then. But I really hope you enjoyed the video. Please do subscribe and give this video a massive like, as it will help my channel, and let's have this tiny channel grow and grow. I will be back soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching. Look after yourself. See you all soon. Bye.